Hello, viewers. I'm Jalani Tesfai, and welcome to Strategic Dialogue Podcast. Our guest today is Mr. Ahmed Yusuf Hirsi, a seasonal expert in regional diplomacy, conflict resolution, and maritime governance. He has advised on peace processes in South Sudan as IGAD's representative and senior political advisor, and has worked closely with organizations like the AU and UN. With deep experience in East Africa and the Horn of Africa, Mr. Hirsi has also led efforts in international maritime security and trained professionals in conflict and security. He holds advanced degrees from Coventry University and the University of Birmingham in conflict, security, and environmental law. Stay tuned. Mr. Ahmed, welcome to Strategic Dialogue Podcast. Very glad to have you here.
I'm also glad to be here.
Nice. So, Somaliland has developed a functioning political system in the absence of international recognition. In light of this, what foundational principles, such as political, social, or historical, have enabled this achievement?
I think, let me talk about the Somali Peninsula, which means both Somaliland, Somalia. The history was actually based on kinship, sort of a pastoral democracy or pastoral community type, whereby everything has to be resolved with consensus. That said, with the Somaliland part, its experience with colonialism was sort of like indirect rule. I mean, the British they were ruling through a traditional existing system, unlike what was happening in the south, which was the Italian, which was a direct rule and really a colonial project, whereby you have an Italian civilians in the south owning farms and everything. With the north, it was different. And that gave the communities in the north, what is Somaliland now, a space to experiment in resolving their own conflicts, and having a foothold in terms of a traditional sort of leadership to grow, as well as to practice their own customary laws. So that is the basis of coming from there, and it's still there today.
Great. So, how does Somaliland's diplomatic limbo shape its internal policy priorities?
I think, from what I've said now before, is that there's a social cohesion in Somaliland itself, and they conduct their elections, but before elections or after elections, there's also a dispute. So there's a mixture of problem-solving skills that come in, and I can safely say that the traditional mechanisms coming in, because the democracy, which is very fragile in Africa, is also fragile in Somaliland in a way. But Somaliland differs with the rest of the other communities is because its traditional mechanisms comes into play immediately. Everything's set aside. Let's keep the constitution a bit. Who is right and who is wrong, and how do we go forward? The bottom line is to keep the security, the social cohesion intact, the trade to continue. So that is the bedrock of it, is problem solving, and that's in the lack of recognition or international sort of interference, that has been its core mitigating mechanism for its own keeping the internal policy without recognition.
So Somaliland's democratic institutions stand in contrast to many others in the Horn. In that sense, what have been the key drivers of your relatively stable and participatory governance model?
If I take you back in the 1990s, there was a national charter, 1991. It evolved from this traditional mechanism I'm talking about. Around 2000, the national charter was withdrawn, a constitution came in that guaranteed, multi-party democracy and all these things, and a referendum where people want to stay in Somaliland, and they did. So the key drivers of stability, I tell you, was that it was a transition from 1991, a national charter of the communities themselves, to 2001, a referendum to stay on course for a Somaliland sort of nation state. So that 10 years gave an experiment of the traditional mechanism to be strong, then move to a multi-party democracy. But then if there's always a crisis, they fall back to that traditional mechanism. So that gave an element of participatory from the grassroots level, from the national touch to the grassroots level, creating the constitution as a grassroots sort of mechanism, bringing all the Somaliland communities at one point. I used to be around when the constitution was drafted around in 1997. There was a reconciliation meeting, and the gathering of the 300 people who were discussing these things for a long period of time, for maybe 3 or 4 months, the new constitution before it was put to a referendum, was very truly representative from all across Somaliland at that time. And what they really put in was basics, traditional mechanisms, which includes the House of Gurti. They call it Gurti, the upper house. Somaliland has got a bicameral system. You have a House of Representatives who come through elections. Then you have traditional representative, esteemed people coming from communities or clans. It's called Gurti. So you have these two systems that cross-check each other. The upper house really was maintained again in the new constitution of 2001, and then it was put into a referendum. So I think that has been the participatory model of governance, to answer your question.
So what are the main risks and constraints of operating under an unrecognized status?
I think political recognition is very important. It gives access to international financing instrument and all that thing. And Somaliland cannot undertake a project or important infrastructure, social infrastructure projects without international financing, as we know. So I think that was a drawback. Otherwise, the state is there, everything is there, the parliament is there, these elections are there, but that thing has been really the missing link, and that's why I think Somaliland puts political recognition as its topmost priority. And that said, it is an agenda of this present government, it was an agenda of the previous administration. And actually this has been really, I've been discussing previously with a colleague, so that it has been very exhaustive in a long time. It's 34 years now since they declared independence, and still they don't have international. I mean, the recognition is lying in a limbo. Will the state continue to hold on? It will continue to hold on, but there could be external factors that could come in. We really don't know, but it could come in. So I think recognition really secures the state. The statehood is there from inside, internally, but externally it does not exist. It's sort of in a limbo.
So we have been discussing how traditional governance has been mixed with modern governance. So in contrast, are there African or non-Western models of governance or diplomacy that Somaliland draws inspiration from?
Internally, the House of Elders, or the Council of Elders, the Majlis, they call it, that is African countries can draw from that one. These are representative of eminent persons coming based on regions or based on clans, whatever it may be, who don't have a vested interest, the only vested interest is the state to exist. And then you have the normal Western style, or Westminster style elections of member of parliaments like everywhere could do. I think these two systems checks together. Maybe Gurti is what they call in the UK the House of Lords, something like that, when they're appointed and then is inherited. It's just like that. I think that is a system that really can be used by communities that are really more traditional, live in a very traditional setting, and that could be a good lesson. But for Africans, really, if they want to solve their problems, the Gurti can stay put to solve a problem, a peace and security issue, even if it takes 3 months. They can sit under a tree, they can be eating their camels and cows until that issue is resolved. In Western style is that no, it has to be a meeting in a hotel and it's going to be 3-4 days. There should be a resolution, there should be sort of a communique issued and an implementation to start immediately. I think our societies are not made like that one, and African societies are not. African societies need to really exhaust all avenues of discussions and come out with the resolution. It takes long. I proposed the same thing for South Sudan when I was working. The peace agreement has been discussed. Yes, it took a long time, But implementing it, everyone has a different understanding. It has not gone down to the community to be understood by all. They have not been able to slaughter bulls and sit under a tree. I use Somaliland example with the one in South Sudan, whereby it was sort of imposed. I was one of those people working on it. It's sort of imposed that, okay, we have a timeline, and then the donors, and these things is funded by, international community. It has a timeline, these resources are exhaustible. But if your people the traditional people were to use their own resources, they don't care how long it takes, but there should be peace at the end, even if it is 6 months or 1 year, sitting under one tree. I think you understand the comparison now.
Yes.
So there are some places this is applicable. South Sudan is one of them.
So what's a major lesson other African nations or regions can learn from the path Somaliland has been taken?
Their own peace things should be funded by them. It should sit within their own existing traditional cultures or structures. And then it should evolve from there. And it gives it a grassroots sort of across-the-board participation. But if it is coming from outside, the intervention is from outside, then the solution will become from outside. It will be very hard to implement, and there will be no peace consolidated or peace ever seen. So the lessons is, go back to your traditional mechanisms. Africans are really a traditional mechanism. Africans are not, how do we solve our problems? Pre-colonial. It's only the post-colonial period we're solving our problems through Western style, sort of a congress or conference, whereby elites, it's only for the elites now.
Right. So situated at a strategic crossroads in the Horn of Africa, what is Somaliland's broader geopolitical vision?
I think its political vision is to be a state, as I said, to be an important member of the Horn of Africa, to use its strategic position at least to enhance its economic, to its economic benefits. The people in Somaliland, like any other Somalis, are entrepreneur by nature. The recognition will bring them freedom of movement, and they will really like the region to really open up so that they use their resources, whatever resources that they have. They put up more infrastructure, and then people are entrepreneurs. People will care less about what the government says or whatever. They will not be really interested in other than their own businesses. Okay. So I think they see an opportunity for growth. But there's one thing lacking, and that is recognition. But this is the vision of any local person in Somaliland, that trade, flow of goods and services will go in. They picture themselves to be a small UAE in future.
So how is Somaliland balancing regional and global interest?
I think one way it balances, first of all, it wants to keep its neutrality. It wants to offer itself and not be a party to any war that may take place. Somaliland will not go out of its way to say that, okay, who is fighting the Houthis? The United States. US, come and stay here with us and then fight the Houthis, because a missile flight from the Houthis will just take 5 minutes or 10 minutes to come into Berber or any major centers in Somaliland. So my people understand that. They will not invite that one. And there was a dialogue that was held with the president that Somaliland should keep dialogue of intellectuals. Somaliland should keep its neutrality. It lives in a strategic area. It's very tense. Tensions are going on. It sits in an area whereby, strategic goods, 20% of the global strategic goods pass through. It sits in an area whereby 30,000 ships pass through the year. It sits in an area which is volatile. And by the way, the Horn of Africa is just an extension of the Middle East, or the Middle East is just an extension of Horn of Africa, the way we do it. What happens there is likely to affect this side. So God forbid that there will be no war with Iran, or there will be no war. And I think Somaliland leadership and its people understand that they don't want to be part of any global, the tensions are there, but global conflagration of conflict that involves them or uses them as the base.
Okay. So how is Somaliland managing ongoing tensions with Somalia while also managing its internal stability?
I think there has been a dialogue between the two on discussing their future relationship. Many conferences have taken place, many meetings have taken place. I believe they were very short in my way, because to discuss the future between them, the future relationship cannot be held in 2 or 3 days with a communique. And this is the Western style I was talking about.
Yeah.
You cannot address. But at the moment, Somaliland has suspended talks with Somalia on account of what is happening in Lesser North. And Sol, Senag, INSSC being absorbed into the federal structure of Somalia. That sort of undermined Somaliland's position, and Somaliland sought to disinvest itself with any talks with Somalia on that one. And right now I don't see now any direct face-to-face talk.
Yes.
Until either the conflict in eastern part of Somaliland is resolved, between, first of all, the parties, which is SSC Khatomo on one side and Somaliland on the other side, and or there is a thinking that in Mogadishu that transformed this, they said, okay, so for us Somalia, then we don't want any part banning, we'll sit back, you people in Somaliland, resolve your issues. And then let's talk now as two parties, in future. But right now, the only thing for Somaliland is to open its hands to resolve the conflict in the east, and I think the current administration has declared that one in order to minimize other external parties taking part in it. And after all, people in Sol and Senagain are people from the north, what was called the north. If there's a ceasefire in place and the resolution of the major points of it, what future is going Somaliland have, or what that region will have vis-a-vis the future Somalia? I think that is a political item to be discussed between two parties, which is Mogadishu and Hargeisa.
Yes. So what is Somaliland's approach to engagement with external powers such as the UAE, China, and the United States?
It engaged with UAE already. It already engaged with the United States. They already feelers or sort of diplomatic engagement. But with China is a bit tricky because Somalia has invited Taiwan to open an office, and Taiwan has asked Somaliland to open an office in Taipei. So there's already a relationship with Taipei that is really displeasing China.
Yes.
So I think China, for now, is out of the question. But with the other two that we have mentioned, UAE and the United States, I think relations are good, and Somaliland's strategic position being there really give importance to whoever is military planners or political planners, give some importance to it. But then still the United States also engaged with Somalia in order to help sort of the government there to fight Al-Shabaab. So it's also another dimension to it.
On that note, the controversial MOU between Ethiopia and Somaliland on naval and port access has generated significant international attention. So from Somaliland's perspective, what are the strategic objectives of this agreement?
First of all, from what was said by the previous administration was that we're going to give to lease land. And this is, I have not seen the MOU, cannot discuss very much what was the content, but what the press was saying is that, okay, we'll give land. The issue of the naval was never proposed by Somaliland at that time. It was never put out in the open. But that we'll give a block of land for 50 years, how many? I cannot remember. 50 years, and it will be a lease, and in return we are going to get political recognition, which is very, very important to people in Somaliland.
Yes.
That was say. But perhaps the discussions that came out was that it's going to be a naval base, and it's not going to be only a port and a naval access. I mean, a corridor, a land strips that links to them. It's sort of like people will put it in to be cautious. Some. For Somalia, we know its position, but within Somaliland, it was like, then let's see what the agreement says, then we can see, because that administration was up for election in that year, and then perhaps it thought that this should be a very good marketing gimmick. But then the MOU did not go beyond what was discussed between the two sides, Addis Ababa and Hargeisa. But it would have been very fine if this was really taken up to the parliament for ratification, which it didn't. It would have been a very good public information for people. People could make choices. Now I said, okay, this is better for us. But from the negotiating point of view, the Somali administration at that time proposed, Ethiopia needs access. This was what was happening. But what was the type of access? Okay, you could get a lease, or you could use it for 50 years, invest it, and get your investments back. But then the sovereignty, that piece of land still remains with us. This is the technical part of it. But what we know is that it's just an MOU, is a general understanding, but you really don't know what the contents were. But the devil's in the details. We don't know what was supposed to come after that. But then it's now no longer there, no? Yeah. But then people in Somaliland were ready to have an engagement. I said, people are entrepreneurs, trade, infrastructure development, joint programs with Ethiopia or Djibouti, whoever is around, in a projects that has less controversy.
Yes.
In a projects that really don't create tensions, projects that can have, but that's also not possible because Mogadishu has to give a go-ahead always.
Yes.
So that's where they call it the Achilles heels of the Somaliland politics. Yeah.
So how do you respond to regional criticism, particularly from Somalia, and international skepticism?
There is international community treats, including all multilateral systems, the African Union, the United Nations, whatever it is, they treat Somalia as one entity. And inviolability of it is territorial, land, sea boundaries. And that was the mechanism that has been used really throughout the MOU. And really put pressure on Ethiopia to withdraw from it. For me, my opinion tells me if there was any really a need for, and there's a need for that one, perhaps an MOU was a quick way. It was not a good way to do it quickly, but I think a dialogue, because Ethiopia was given the port of Berbera 19%, almost 20% shareholding under a mechanism of UAE, Somaliland government, Dubai World, or whatever it is, and Ethiopia. That could be a very good mechanism to expand it from there. That agreement was there. But the MOU sort of sent people to Mogadishu or Somalia to be a bit shocked that part of its land is now being given away. And that's what I'm saying. And this has caused a sort of a backlash from Somalia and other multilateral systems or multilateral mechanisms. But there was a good agreement for Berbera Port, 19% ownership of the Ethiopians, and perhaps they could put a shareholding funds to it, and then they could build on that one, to expand on the trade and other facilities. But it somehow, the whole MOU thing was shrouded in politics, so it was never, it didn't go to a technical level to be discussed, because when you put a political side and discuss the technical part, then now we talk about trade agreements, funds, shareholding, and that would be. But we have not gone to that one. But that exists, and even now Ethiopia could still join the Berbera thing because it existed.
Great. Moving to economy. How's the intensifying competition over key trade corridors such as Lapsset, Berbera, and Djibouti reshaping regional military alliances and political power balances?
For me, I will not characterize it as a competition. I will characterize it as economic growth. Lapsset was created to have a northern corridor that comes from a new area called Lamu. Part of it comes through Moyale to Ethiopia, and the other trunk goes to South Sudan. Both countries' economics are growing. They will need to diversify its ports, Because for a country which does not have ports or seaboard, it needs to identify it. To diversify it. Instead of relying on Port Sudan, South Sudan needs to diversify. It exports through Port Sudan, and you know what is happening now in Port Sudan. The country becomes bottled up. So they rely now on a bit of Kenya to import essential goods. So LAPSET was one way to carry bulk into South Sudan and partly into Sudan, in Ethiopia as well. And then Sudan again. Ethiopia was diversifying its ports, options, in case of politics going bad or in case of instability. So that is the economic idea, because the volume of populations grow, the volume of trade will grow.
Yes.
So infrastructure will be needed, more ports. And I tend to think that for any port that is developed in the Somali Peninsula, Somaliland, or any other parts, it will cater. It's not for domestic use. 95% to 98% will be for trade corridor. To who? To Ethiopia. So Ethiopia will be diversifying, and it makes economic sense. And as the economy expands, the population expands, there will be a need to import. So that's actually an economic sense to the region, which is very much integrated. I don't know whether you know East Africa, is that everything leaves Mombasa and Dar es Salaam goes to Congo by way of multimodal systems, by rail, it comes by sea, it goes by rail, it goes by ship, it goes by trucks. You have all the except air, everything else, heavy goods. This side of the region has less of that. So why doesn't the region cooperate in doing that? Especially Ethiopia leading. They said, okay, let's cooperate. I need 4-5 more ports to be developed. And with the political clout that maybe Ethiopia has, they said, okay, I need 3-4 more ports to be developed. One is Berbera, 2 more. Djibouti has been expanding its ports all across. The whole country will be ports. If you go there, you see it's growing more than the city. Because they're locating more ports. For whom? For Ethiopia. So I think it makes economic sense, and it's not competition. There will always be a corridor, 1 or 2 corridors needed. Ethiopia could even create a dry dock. Dry dock means an area in Jigjiga which is very open space. All the goods that come to Berbera is not shipped directly to Ethiopia. Then you make a small customs there like Kaliti. Everything is done there now. All the paperwork is done there. Everything is cleared because of the volume of this and the speed that's required to move it quickly. You may have a lot of places, and then in that way you open up the eastern part of the country for economic sort of exploitation. So for me, it's not a competition. For me, it's an economic sense and an economic expansion, and bringing peace and prosperity to the country, to the region.
So to what extent are these infrastructure projects financed by external powers such as China, the UAE, Turkey, and how is it sustainable in the long term?
I think, to do such kind of projects, you need international financing. If you don't have enough financing to yourself, you need to access international financing. And I don't know whether China has been doing infrastructure projects in Africa. Ports, to road, to mines. For them, they want resources. And Africa is virgin. There's no those kind of infrastructure. The need of the political leadership in Africa wants infrastructure in order to develop their own economies. So whoever comes who really has an economic interest, Turkey or China has an economic interest in the Horn of Africa, they really appreciate to do joint projects actually. If they locate a project in Somalia or Somaliland that will cater to Ethiopia, that will cater to South Sudan, this is the best ideal situation I ever have. Europe is very much integrated. You can use your ID card to go around everywhere. You can ship your goods from one end to the other one. It's only Africa which is restricted. Why? Because of the economic challenge, or because of infrastructure challenge, or because of a lack of political environment that really create the conditions for this one. So economic conditions, political conditions should be created. The regulatory mechanisms for really freedom of movement and goods should be created. And then donors need to see an interest now if they invest this. Countries, when they invest this, they need to run and manage that port for a certain time in order to get their money back. They see that, okay, I'm an investor, I need my money back in a way, but it's okay to invest now upfront. What does a country need? The recipient country. The recipient country needs infrastructure. Even if this is going to be returned to them 20 years after, it doesn't matter. It means jobs, it means economic activity, it means number of companies that will be working in that area also. So for me, I don't see this as it's actually a boom to create infrastructure. Africa needs to do that one. Horn of Africa needs to do that one. Somaliland with Ethiopia or Somalia, whoever they need to do that kind of things.
Let's move to Egypt. So Egypt's growing naval posture in the Red Sea, combined with its Nile diplomacy, is increasingly assertive. So how might Egypt use the Red Sea crisis to influence Somaliland's aspirations, possibly by aligning more closely with Mogadishu to assert control over strategic maritime spaces?
They are already aligned. There's already a treaty. There's already a defense treaty, which means that this is issues that were brought around by the MOU. In the event, perhaps Ethiopia wants to flex its muscles as far as or come in support of MOU aspirations that Egypt is here. Egypt, we know Egypt's agenda and Egypt's beef with Ethiopia, we know. That is a separate issue. But then now, it took an opportunity to join up because of it find a pretext now to join up. And of course, it's coming at the invitation of Somalia. So really, excuse me, really, now the tensions are not over, but the tensions have not gone. There could be a pretext for a future sort of conflict, but I don't think now it's going to be, the MOU is going to be part of it anymore. But it certainly puts pressure on Somaliland, yes, militarily or politically. Egypt does not see now Somaliland with kind eyes as well, kind eyes anyway. It just sees as part of Somalia, and that can go either way. It can join up with Ethiopia in the future, whatever it is. So I think Somaliland is already in the drawing boards of Egypt in terms of a defense posture, and that is really not it's not pleasing, really, not really, because Egypt has come into the fore. Okay, Turkey has also a treaty with Somalia. It really puts Somalia in a tight spot, to be frank with you.
So is Somaliland currently cooperating with any regional or international actors on maritime security, anti-piracy, or Red Sea governance?
First of all, state-to-state cooperation, I think this is Djibouti. They have that cooperation. As far as patrols are concerned, the coastal guard, whatever it is. There's no other, but these are, of course, as far as patrols are concerned, maintaining the security there. The European Union Naval Force, they call it UNAFOR, or Operation Atlanta, also has it keeps an eye on sort of anti-piracy operations. It also provides some programmatic support in terms of training capacity building for the coastal guard in Somaliland. That's what I can say, because the coastal guard, and even for Somalia itself, nobody has been asked. They've been asked. No navy will be supported by European Union or other multilateral agencies. They will not go for that one to support the navy. But with coastal policing, yes. So I think it's getting what the other states are getting, like Somalia is getting. This is what they get.
So in this context, how do you envision strengthening maritime partnerships moving forward?
For Somaliland, there should be an investment in terms of naval assets or training and whatever it is. And there should be a sponsor, or there should be a country to support that one. To do that one, there have to be sort of a bilateral agreement, like what Turkey is doing with Somalia. I believe that country has to come out openly. They have not yet found a country that sees Somali strategic thing. Okay, the strategy is that they need to have their own naval capacity to really defend their own coastal territories. It has not yet come. What is here now is just programmatic support, but it could be possible that in future a country would come. UAE does support Somalia, or Puntland, for that case. It supports, there's a Puntland Maritime police force that does the patrols. So I will not be surprised if UAE comes in again on the other side, because they have a port. They also discussed they have a port agreement. Both hands support with UAE, the same with Berbera. They support the maritime sort of operations by really supporting the Navy itself.
So the regional race for port access and trade infrastructure by Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Uganda is really transforming the Horn. So do you view these projects as promoting genuine regional integration, or are they fostering new dependencies and rivalries that could fragment the Horn economy?
I said before, they are not. There's no rivalry there. You know, business by its very nature is rival. If the cost of shipping through Mombasa going to South Sudan is costly, South Sudan has an option to import it from Djibouti if the infrastructure is there.
Yeah.
Because there was a discussion between Djibouti, Ethiopia, and South Sudan when I was in South Sudan to create a highway. And South Sudan got a piece of land where they can create their own storage in Djibouti. They've already hired. All that is to diversify ports. So if a country which does not have ports diversifies its ports, and then come the infrastructure that is to convey the goods, you have the port as a trade noodle, and then you have the highway as a conveyor, of the goods. Whereas, because of vagaries of politics or instability, you have another option to go. You go southwards. Southern corridor, if it is there, to import lapset or something like that, to import your essential goods. If that becomes expensive, you have other options. Because other ports do compete in terms of rates, handling, the cost of storage, and all that thing, insurance, many things, So if the cost is a bit lower, then you go for the lower one, increase. But the infrastructure has to be there always. So it's like you're looking for a house, and this neighborhood becomes expensive. You go to another neighborhood which is cheaper. Always markets work like that one, and ports will be like that. Yeah, you increase it, they move somewhere else. But right now the options are very little. We have very less option from Mombasa and Djibouti, nothing in between. Mogadishu is still underdeveloped very much.
Great. So
the only thing you have is Berbera, yeah?
Yeah, sorry. So what are Somaliland's top 3 development priorities for the next decade?
I think one is economic development. First of all, Somaliland, things is tied to the rest of the region. Peace and stability has to be there. Their priority will be economic development, having more joint projects, like I said. Any port that is made or any highway that is made is to convey goods to an inland country like Ethiopia. That's a joint project. So it's to have more joint projects, to open more border entries. So much more is much more economic. So setting aside what is called the politics of recognition, economic engagement is the most important thing. So once you do the economics, I think politics will follow later. But if you begin with politics, for me, I see that it stops everything. So I think Somaliland's priority for now, the way I understand it, is economic engagement with the Horn countries, even if it is South Sudan, even if it is Ethiopia or even Uganda.
Great. So how do you envision the Somaliland's cooperation with Ethiopia on trade, energy, military modernization, and investments advancing?
I see there's already there to some extent, but it has not grown. It has not been expanded. Somaliland needs cheap energy for it to grow. We know Ethiopia provides some electricity and some water to Djibouti. Okay, it's a small population. Somaliland will need electricity, which is to cooperate in the energy sector. It can also cooperate. Yes, the 2-3 more important things. I don't think military will be a good thing for the moment, given our experience with the MOU. But there's a huge potential for energy and cross-border trade. And Ethiopia will need a cheap source of energy. Ethiopia will need access, sort of, the services that are provided, the trade nodal, establish it as trade offices in Somaliland. That's the matter. So that can be built upon and open more border entries for its goods to enter. Many areas in Somalia are developing ports, by the way, in anticipation that highways will be developed to connect with it. So trade is a big thing for Somaliland. Energy is also a big thing for Somaliland. And if they are to get from Ethiopia an electricity for supplying for a couple of million people, I mean, that will be the best thing. While they start mining or getting their own renewable sources or getting their own energy sources, either from the sea or from the wind or from their own fossils on the ground. But then the first alternative will be sort of the energy, electricity line all the way. And it's not very far, you just tap it from Jigjiga, yeah? And so it's just 70 kilometers. Yeah.
So despite lacking formal recognition, what role does Somaliland aspire to play in regional organizations such as IGAD, the African Union, and the AFCFT?
I mean, Somalia would like to gain an observer status if it is possible. Okay. Somalia would like to get access to whatever programming benefits or if there are any projects that are done by these organizations. It's two ways. We know in principles for these two organizations or three or even the UN, Somalia is there. But then in absence of a dialogue between them or in absence of separation between them or recognition, because of recognition, I mean, they should not be denied the programmatic or the benefits from these two organizations at the functional level. But going one more step, if they are going to get an observer status, sort of like others are having, in AU there's Polisario there already. There's many African liberation movement used to have an observer status in AU. I remember SWAPO was there, ANC was there, I mean, because they were fighting colonialism. Yeah, okay. What about? And by the way, in this country, in this region, it gave birth to 2 states in Horn of Africa. Horn of Africa is different from other Africans. So there's no one rule that says, okay, let's keep our post-colonial borders like that. Eritrea separated after a very bitter struggle. South Sudan, after a very bitter struggle. So we're waiting for another bitter struggle now between the Somalis. I mean, that's the question. Why should humanity die?
So how does Somaliland engage with these organizations currently, and what are your long-term diplomatic aspirations?
I don't think they engage it per se. I don't think they're given a seat at the table.
What about long-term ambitions?
It will be very fine, long-term, if they're given access to it. They're trying. Some of the proposals were saying, okay, engage at the program level first of all. Let there be Somalia, sit there for the time being, but engage with them, have a presence in the country. Yeah, they are not present, and AUSOM is in the south, by the way. The troops are in the south.
So, my final question: what is one thing you would most like the international community to understand about Somaliland today, especially in the context of its growing partnership with Ethiopia and the broader regional engagement it has?
I think one thing is that I want the international community to know that it's an important part of the world. It should not be ignored. And the international community can come in at least, find a mediating role between Somalia and Somaliland. And support Somaliland in its quest for economic development. Even if there's no political recognition yet, but its quest for development should not be ignored. I mean, these are the three areas. It's a natural trading partner for the time being. I mean, the way we see is actually Somaliland is looking south or west, that is Ethiopia. So I think Ethiopia should do more also, along with the international community.
Mr. Ahmed, we've had a very great discussion. Once again, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Great.